And now, the lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Lowe.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the lowdown. My name is Elson Lowe, and it's always good to be here with you. Good night to you for this Tuesday night. You're starting your Tuesday night on a high with Elson Lowe. Thank you for tuning in. Folks, share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to be in. Let's get everyone here. Thanks for joining on the lowdown. We're just a few minutes late, so share that link, folks. Get everyone in. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming here to speak with us. My name is again Elson Lowe, and you're watching the lowdown. We have a Saturday show. We have a Tuesday show. We cover different things on this particular show. We're going to cover issues in the news. So we're going to talk a bit about the press conference earlier today, as well as some things that have come up in the news, even some things that have come up today in the news. So we're going to catch you up on some of the important things that have been happening around the country, how they affect your daily lives, some of the critical issues that affect your daily lives. And we're going to give you a sense of what you should always be aware of going forward. Folks, welcome to the lowdown. Share the link. It's good to be here with you guys. It's always good to have a chat with you. So share the link. Let's get everyone in here tonight. Let's get everyone in. Folks, just a reminder to always check that oil price. The last I saw was $104, $105 a barrel. So still above the $100 mark. We're going to talk a bit more about some of the things you've got to keep in mind, developments and what they point to as possibilities for the rest of the year. As I indicated on a previous show, and as I've been indicating, everyone in Guyana has got to become familiar with the oil and gas industry. Just as in the past, we've had sugar as a major industry and bauxite as a major industry, where people had to become familiar with those industries. We've got to all, as collectively as a nation, become very familiar with the oil and gas industry, what the oil price is doing, what international oil markets are saying, because this will have a direct effect on what you see the government being able to do and what you see the government doing. So this will have a direct effect on your lives, on your livelihoods, and we're going to talk a bit about that tonight. We're going to get into what could be done, should be done, and is not being done. We're going to get into a bit of that tonight, because that is exactly what's going on. Things that should be done are not being done. Folks, share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to be here with us. Let's bring everyone in. Welcome to the lowdown. We just did our oil price check, $105 a barrel, Brent crude. And we're gonna lean into things in just a second. We're gonna talk a bit about the start things off, the expo, and we're gonna bring up a slide just in a second regarding the expo. We've got the building expo. Let's get the first slide up. It's not quite a meme of the week, but still pretty entertaining. Some of you may know that the government has brought in a 3D printer that is able to basically print houses. And while that's a great technology, and we appreciate innovation, of course, and we want to encourage innovation, one thing that the government seems not to have been particularly aware of is that you can't print a house. You can't use a 3D printer in the rain. And so what you're looking at there is supposed to be a house that would have been printed over the course of the building expo. But actually, they've not been able to do anything much at all, and that's because of the rain. So that is supposed to be a house that would have been printed with a 3D printer. A 3D printer, it will basically print a house the same way that you would print something in layers. That is to say, layer by layer, it'll build up, pouring concrete essentially and creating a three-dimensional structure. So that's how you get your house. Layer by layer, it pours concrete. But concrete can only be poured when it's dry out, right? And as a result, the house just hasn't made a whole lot of progress. We've had a building expo for several days, and the house has made almost no progress. Viewers, it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems obvious to me that if you realize that that is a vulnerability that the 3D printer faces, that you might want to erect a very large tent to shield the printer from the inclement weather. Now, I don't know if that would have been enough, but it seems to me that that's the first place that you would have started, a very substantial weatherproofing. Now, that's one thing. That's one thing. We're not seeing that the 3D printer have the best time. But another thing to consider, viewers, is that, and again, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, we have a lot of rain in Guyana. Are you aware that we have a lot of rain in Guyana, viewers? So I'm not sure that a printer which is struggling right now in what should really be the best of conditions in a public space, good infrastructure around it, good access to everything that it should need. If you're seeing a struggle now, this might not be a technology that suits this particular climate. It might, it might require a little bit of adjustment and some thought. And of course, while you may be able to erect a tent at a building expo to allow a 3D printer to operate, you can't erect a tent every single place that you carry the 3D printer to build a house in the country. That's not feasible at all. So interesting that the government has brought it. It's supposed to generate some attention and so on. And of course, innovation is great, and we want as much innovation as we can have. But maybe next time the government should give it a bit more thought before they operate that way. So unfortunately, where we should have had a house, we don't have anything much. Let's operator, if we can get that image back up. Let's give viewers another shot of that, where there's supposed to be a house, but there isn't a house. There you go. So you've got your 3D printer supposed to have already built a house right there, but instead you've got what looks like just about foundations. You've got the sky above. I don't see a tent covering it. And as a result, with all the rain, it's been a bit of a task. Another thing you could probably have asked is, why wasn't this situated during a period of drier weather, a drier month, when this would have been a successful demonstration? So all questions to ask, ladies and gentlemen. But to my mind, what this 3D printed house really calls to mind, or what it really indicates, is that, and again, you might find this entertaining, but viewers, the government has been talking about Silica City as being a major housing development that it wants to do. Silica City is supposed to be a major housing development. But you know how long the government has been talking about Silica City? Since 2013, the government has been talking about Silica City. So even if you discount the years the coalition was in office, there's been around about 4 years. Have we seen anything substantial? We're still hearing about some studies being done as to how they're going to lay down the infrastructure. That's another great example of how, a half-baked plan that doesn't actually concretely deal with things. Look at that pun there, viewers. Concretely deal with things can leave you without much progress. So we're going to see if anything happens in Silica City, but I can tell you that the coalition has much more comprehensive plans regarding housing in Guyana. We recognize the real scale of the problem and the way that the country is swiftly changing. We've seen massive migration from Venezuela, approximately 30,000 people, but sometimes you hear higher figures than that. We've seen massive migration into the country when it comes to oil and gas workers, and we expect some of that to continue. We expect to see changes to the economy as a result of the oil and gas workers coming in. We expect to see changes in the housing patterns. How oil and gas workers are going to want a house to themselves. So where they're willing to pay a higher rent than you, they might displace you, and no oil and gas worker is going to be willing to live in your bottom house. They're going to want a house to themselves if they're earning a high salary. This will displace a lot of people, and we've spoken about this previously on the show. The way that the economy is changing, we expect as many as 90,000 people may be displaced out of Georgetown and the surrounding areas. There's also concern about what are the areas that oil and gas folks are willing to go to. They may not be willing to go too far down the coast, as an example. So that increases the housing pressures on areas that are more central. This creates a serious housing problem. The Private Sector Commission has indicated that they've seen housing rental costs triple. They've seen rental costs triple around in certain neighborhoods in Georgetown. Now, that'll only happen if you have tremendous demand. That is what we're seeing. And as a result of that, every time that someone actually, if from the oil and gas industry, pays that high rent and gets a property, that displaces a family or a group of people in Guyana from that house. Sometimes it might displace two families. Somebody's living in the bottom apartment, somebody's living in the top apartment, something to that effect. You're going to see people being displaced. So we have looked at these types of things. We've recognized the scale and urgency of the problem, and we have comprehensive plans that are being put in place to deal with this that you'll find out more about as we go along. What we've seen from the government is a group of band-aid solutions, 100 houses there, 100 houses there, house lots there, house lots there. But in terms of a proper assessment, of course, if 30,000 Venezuelans move to the country and you promise 50,000 house lots, then most of that excess capacity is already going to be eaten up by these additional people moving to the country. So that's something that has to be taken into account. Absolutely has to be taken into account, and we believe has not properly been taken into account. We've seen money being spent on housing, but even then, what are you looking at? 100 low-income houses there, 100 low-income houses over there. I think this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the scale of the problem and the speed of the change. And I reiterate, if you see rental prices triple in a short space of time, it shows you that there's a big shift that is going on. They didn't go up by 20%, they didn't go up by 50%, then double, tripled. That's what we're hearing in many areas around Georgetown. There's actually a development that's being planned for high-end housing in Cummings Lodge. Now that is going to totally transform that area if that takes place. And it again helps you to think now, what about all the people that live in Cummings Lodge? Is there going to be a change there where they may be gradually pushed out of that housing? That's a significant population. And if that happens in Cummings Lodge, it's going to take about 10 minutes for it to start happening in Sophia. And so that's how this sort of process takes place, where people are gradually displaced. In the States, they call it gentrification. But essentially, what we need to do is to ensure that we're aware of the changes and we're planning so that we deal with these changes properly, because we don't want Guyanese who are not working in the oil and gas sector not to be able to access housing and to find themselves in a real problem. So that is something that is something that we're paying very close attention to. We're aware of the problem, and we're developing and have put in place some of the structures and plans to deal with this issue, as opposed to, as I mentioned, the band-aid approach that the government is taking, giving you some cement, some steel. While I understand that may be useful to people, that is a very small scale way of approaching this. Even when it comes to the banks lending at lower interest rates and giving you lower down payment amounts, while again, that's a measure that could increase the amount of loans and so on, it would appear to me that quite a lot of Guyanese have bad credit. I would ask how many Guyanese owe various agencies, whether it is for a chair set or a stove or a generator or a fridge. A lot of Guyanese owe, and because of low income levels, people may have had difficulty repaying. Are you going to be able to access a loan? We've got to think that. We've got to think in a more comprehensive way than that. Otherwise, we're going to have some serious problems as this economy continues to change rapidly. Folks, just as a reminder, Guyana at the beginning of the year was expected to grow at about 50%. We've now seen that upgraded to closer to 60%, an acceleration of around about 10%. Now, this is something that we mentioned in the press conference today. If your country is growing at 10%, that is considered to be an extremely high rate of growth. We are growing so fast that we've had an upgrade of 10%. We're not growing at 50%. We're growing at 60%, an upgrade of a whole 10%. That's unbelievable, folks. And very few people in the entire history of the world would have had the opportunity to live in a country that's growing at 60%. Very few people would have been able to have that opportunity. We've even seen some various the stocks in the Guyana Stock Exchange. Some stocks jump up by as much as 35% in a short space of time. This happened recently, I believe, with Demerara Bank. So this is money is being made. People are becoming quite wealthy. The question is, viewers, is this spreading across the population, or are these GDP numbers confined to a few people, a few beneficiaries? Let's get the next slide up here as we roll into this discussion around oil and around the changes in Guyana. So what we've actually seen recently is Exxon announce additional. We've seen Exxon announce additional oil finds. So what they're saying is that they've seen 2 more discoveries, double discoveries, and that brings the total number of discoveries for the year up to, and viewers, if you can believe this, up to 7 discoveries so far this year. We're only a little bit past the halfway mark, and we've already got 7 discoveries. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable amount, and that brings the total number of discoveries that Exxon has made in Guyana up to 33 discoveries. 33 discoveries. Folks, remember when we made the first discovery, and then the second, and there was all of this wondering whether there would be, whether there wouldn't be. Now we're all the way up to 33. Folks, this time in a long time, the government can't realistically sit and present solutions that we would have seen without oil. All of these things, all of these housing approaches are approaches that you would have seen without oil. We need to have a new vision, a broader vision, a more ambitious vision of the country. That is something that you're going to see coming from the PNCR. We've already indicated that we believe that salary top-ups to help to bring people above the poverty line, that those on the lower end of the income scale, that those are important policies, that stipends for students so that they can further their education, receive support while furthering their education or while improving the education that they've already got. We've already talked extensively about those types of programs. And what we're going to be pushing even further, some of the things that we're going to be pushing even further, is these types of broad strategic approaches to deal with the national challenges that we face, instead of these small scale approaches that would have been implemented anyway if we hadn't had oil. We gotta think about this as a fresh situation, a new start in many ways. And as a result of this difference, we gotta up our game as a country and think big. The idea that you can just build 100 low-income house lots is quite amusing, but that's what the government thinks that is going to carry the day. So on the one hand, we're seeing more oil discoveries, we're seeing tremendous economic growth. Let's get the next slide up as we continue to talk about these developments. Okay, so actually what we're hearing from Exxon now is that they've reached full capacity. Now, what that means, what does full capacity of production mean? Exxon's got 2 vessels operating right now, which is the Liza vessels. And that essentially is 120,000 was the barrels of oil a day was the original amount for Liza. It's moved up to 140. And then I believe it's about 220 for the additional, the second floating vessel that's producing the oil. But these vessels don't produce at maximum capacity immediately. They gradually build up capacity. Now, what we've seen is that Exxon has reached full capacity. They've just announced that they've reached full capacity. So that means that they're pumping as much oil as they can really pump out of these vessels. So you've got 140,000 barrels of oil a day coming out of the first FPSO, and 220,000 barrels of oil a day coming out of the second FPSO, for 360,000 barrels of oil a day production amount. That is far higher than the highest ever Trinidadian oil production per day. Far, far higher, almost, I think it's about 50% higher, something to that effect. Far higher. So you're going to see huge revenues come in, and we expect between $1 billion and $1.5 billion of oil revenues coming in this year. Great, sounds good. Production is going well, high oil price, everything is good. But citizens, is your life going well? Are you benefiting directly from these sorts of things? Or are you in a situation with the cost of living and the rising inflation and the cost of housing and all these things? I mean, are you any better off, or is it just the ones who are at the top? That is the real anxiety about this. You know, we've said on this show before, oil is a funny thing. Oil is a funny thing. And there are countries where they've got oil, and since they've gotten oil, they've actually seen standards of living decline. They've seen things get worse after they got oil. Equatorial Guinea, which is the poster child for corruption really internationally, is an oil producing country. They have a per capita GDP that is higher than Spain, 30 something $1,000. Very high per capita GDP. But standards of living and governance has declined since they've gotten oil. That's one of the things that is plaguing that country. Poverty and so on persists despite the fact that they have this high per capita GDP. You know that Guyana's per capita GDP is higher than China's right now? Higher than China's? Yeah. Even at purchasing power parity, even if you look at what you can purchase, it's still higher than China's. It's about 20,000, 19,000 US. That's the per capita GDP at purchasing power parity. That's a lot. That's way, way more than it was very recently. But folks, are you seeing any of the benefits? And you may say, oh, well, you know, this is all up in the air. The government can't really do anything. But, can't the government provide relief assistance and investment in people at this stage? Well, they certainly can, and we're going to talk about the supplemental budget that the government is laying before Parliament and how lacking that is in any kind of assistance. Let's get the next slide up, folks, as we roll on this evening. So here we have Exxon saying that they've confirmed they're up to full capacity, full production, and we've seen the government say they expect as many as 13 lifts over the course of the year from the oil and gas resources. So we get around 13 lifts. Now, when I say lifts, I mean that we're going to collect Guyana's share, which is 13 million barrel shipments that we can sell on the open market. We've seen actually the original estimate for what we think oil prices will average out over the course of the year be around $75 a barrel. That was what we thought at the beginning of the year. Now it has been consistently over $100 a barrel. So we're making a big jump over, a huge amount more than we expected. Of course, this is partly due to the war in Ukraine. We have said that since you're going to see these high prices, and you're going to see these high prices reflected at the pump, we need to see some of the excess used to bring down and keep oil prices down at the pump. This will also help to bring down the cost of goods when it comes to farm goods and so on, because the cost from farm to market will be brought down, the cost of transporting these goods. We've also talked about vouchers for minibus drivers and those same farm to market vehicles to bring the cost down even further. There are things that can be done immediately to help to bring the costs of these basic goods down to benefit all Guyanese. There are things that can be done, but the question is the government interested in doing these things? And of course, some of you may say, oh, the government is interested. Look, they gave out a few cash grants here, there, but there's been no substantial response across the country to these types of things. No substantial response, and that's what people are crying out for, a substantial response that has a big effect. We're still seeing inflation rise. We're still seeing the cost of living go up. We're not seeing a substantial effort. The government now had a great opportunity with this supplemental. I believe we've got a chart there, a headline there of the supplemental, $44 billion supplemental. I believe we've got that up. There we go. So $44.7 billion supplemental budget. This is an additional budget that is going to that they've come to Parliament to look for funds so that they can spend these funds in the economy. Okay, this is a great opportunity for the government to go to Parliament to get some funding. This is a great opportunity for the government to say, well, you know, we recognize this situation. We recognize the situation. We're going to do something about it, and we're going to help the Guyanese people. It's a great opportunity. You know how much is in this budget to help with cost of living? $0. Nothing. There's nothing in there. There's things for water projects and housing projects and building things in Amerindian communities and so on. And while some of these things may be necessary, we'll have to debate this. Where is the big provision? Where is the big provision to assist with cost of living? Where is the provision to help to bring gasoline prices down? Where is any of that? They have had a perfect opportunity to say to the public, we are looking at what's going on. We appreciate the difficulties you're faced. Here's some relief to benefit the broader population. They had opportunity. I didn't tell them to go and put that before Parliament. They decided to put that there. And so now we can see clearly that they just don't care. It's not, oh, it's an abstract idea, we're just saying that. They have had an opportunity. The government has had an opportunity to say to the people, we care. We're going to drop X number of billion in a widespread program for you. And they decided not to do it. They decided not to do it. So that same $5 billion that we saw at the beginning of the year in the first budget, that same less than 1% of the national budget that we saw that was put aside for cost of living mitigation. Folks, the first budget of the year, the national budget, $550 billion, one of the biggest, and the biggest by far in the country's history. Less than 1% put towards cost of living mitigation. Folks, we had a whole crisis in Ukraine, a whole cost of living spike in Ukraine, sent gas prices through the roof, sent the price of flour through the roof, sent the price of cooking oil through the roof, sent the price of other grains through the roof, foodstuffs through the roof. All of that happened. First of all, no immediate response, right? Oh, they said, oh, we're going to try and produce wheat. Where's the wheat? Where is it? People are punishing right now. Where is it? Maybe next year you might see something, but in the meantime, what's going to happen? You just have to take the punishment. That's the approach. This guy needs to say, you just got to take it. No. This is not acceptable. And then, after all of that, they come to Parliament with a supplemental budget with nothing in it. Nothing in it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, folks. You can't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Additionally, it was indicated that supplemental budgets are supposed to really be for things that are unforeseen. The government is putting about $21 billion towards housing and infrastructure and so on in this supplemental. So that means that they suddenly knew that there was housing issues. Halfway through the year, they suddenly knew that. The thing that happened that was unpredictable is the war in Ukraine. That's what happened that was unpredictable. But no money towards that. But instead, money towards this infrastructure project, which they should have known about all along. Wow. And who's going to benefit from that? Yes, some Guyanese will benefit. But a lot of the PPP cronies now will be able to benefit from whatever it is. That's one of the things that can happen. So for the average Guyanese, for the people out there that are suffering from these high prices and so on, I guess you're going to be waiting a long time for support. Even when it came to raising the minimum wage, basic thing like raising the minimum wage from a paltry $44,000 to a similarly paltry $60,000. But you know how long it took them to raise that minimum wage? You know how long it took them? It took them about 6 months. People had to be cussing in the newspapers, the trade unions. It was a whole thing. So long it took them, 6 months. And during that 6 months, you had the war in Ukraine. And they're still not raising the minimum wage. What is the PPP up to? What is going on? They talk about unresponsive government. You ever hear that? Oh, the government's not listening. I believe that this government is deaf. Because if you can't tell that you need to provide cost of living assistance now, then you will never be able to tell. I previously said at the press conference, is a brave party that would bring a budget like that to the National Assembly, a supplemental like that to the National Assembly, with nothing inside. Wow. That is, well, hey, all that's going to happen is that people are going to be mad, and they rightfully should be mad. So that's one side of the thing, nothing in there. But folks, We started off this conversation by saying Exxon find more oil finds. The country's growth has accelerated. You're seeing 60% growth, billions going to be made, all of this. So in the midst of this time of plenty, in the midst of this situation where growth is accelerating because of the high oil price, in the midst of that, you're seeing nothing put towards cost of living. Nothing. Wow. Wow. That's what you're saying. Folks, we are going to pressure these guys. We're going to pressure these guys. We're going to pressure these guys because this is unbelievable and frankly unacceptable. Unacceptable. They are essentially saying to the Guyanese public that you're just going to have to suffer. That's what they're saying. You're just going to have to suffer. This is unacceptable, and we've called them out, and we will continue to call them out and pressure them over the course of the parliamentary debates of these particular estimates. But folks, from your end, you've got to put pressure as well. Every time you see them, you need to ask them about this. Every time you see somebody that is an activist for them, you ask them about this. You need to also put pressure on them, folks, because it is your money. It is you who are punishing, and they are benefiting, but they're not letting the average Guyanese benefit. That's what's going on in PUP. They're happy. They're swimming in it. But what about you, the average Guyanese? It's not like the country is broke, times are hard, we're struggling like many other countries. In Suriname, there's endless protests and so on and so forth. They haven't been able to really get their oil industry going quite yet. But here, apparently, money is being made, things are going well, oil price is high, producing a lot. Exxon has reached its maximum capacity that it can pump. What's going on? That's what's so hilarious about this, folks. It's I say I have a dark sense of humor. This is incredibly unfortunate, but that's what we're faced with. That is what we're faced with. The government has had an opportunity to make a strong statement to say that it prioritizes people's well-being in these circumstances, and it has declined to do so. It's decided that it doesn't care, and it's going to be straightforward about the fact it doesn't care. So you, fellow citizens, when it comes time to vote, you have to don't care about them as well, irrespective of your party. They have had an opportunity. Nothing. But this is the situation for right now. Let's get the next slide up as we continue the conversation, because we're going to talk a bit about, as we continue to see events unfold, what's going on with Russia here. Because what we're going to see is highly likely to be something that's very important as the year rolls on. There's really a lot of instability internationally, and this is kind of reflected in what we're seeing. This is reflected in what we're seeing in Europe. Excuse me. So natural gas prices are in some ways tight oil prices, because natural gas is a substitute for oil, especially in electricity generation. So if the price of natural gas goes up, it can often drag up the oil price. And that's something that you'll be able to observe if you look at graphs of the change in the oil price. Now, what has happened is that really, over a period of time, there's been a lot of tension around natural gas supplies in Europe, because of this conflict in Ukraine, where the Europeans are on the other side of the conflict from Russia. And Russia is a massive supplier of natural gas to the Europeans, massive supplier of natural gas to the Europeans. So as a result of that, you've got a lot of concern. And when it gets cold in the winter in Europe, they're going to really need this natural gas. So there's been a lot of concern around, first of all, a reduction in the amount that was being provided to Europe. And the idea being that maybe this was due to technical problems, maybe not. So there's a question around that. There's also then a pause to some countries that we're seeing, where again, there's this claim that there's technical issues. So we've seen a decline in the amount of gas produced. And what that is doing essentially is stopping European countries from being able to stockpile the gas for the winter. Why is this important to you, viewers? We're seeing a gradual escalation of tensions between Europe and Russia around the Ukraine war, a gradual escalation of tensions. And as the year goes on, we've talked already about in previous shows the European Union's plan to stop paying Russia the market price, to pay them a lower price for their oil. And Russia say that any country that does this, they're not going to supply them with oil. That accounts for about 3 million barrels of oil a day that Russia is saying that they won't supply. Now, if that is removed from the market, you could see a huge spike in the price of oil. So what I'm trying to convey to you viewers is that as much as we hope that inflation may come down, we're seeing gradually the tensions continue to build leading into the later part of the year, where there may be a real showdown over this oil issue and this natural gas issue. There may be a real showdown. I think it's early December that these things go into full effect, but they start to be phased in shortly. So as we see this happen, these concerns will grow. What is really the Germans are in particular concerned about is that you may see, because the German economy relies quite heavily on natural gas, a serious recession in Germany, which will again cause a lot of these concerns. And we've seen Ukraine say that the Russians are using fear tactics. Now open for debate. But the point of it being that this is a charged environment, and it seems to gradually be building towards a real crisis, so we must be aware. We must not allow the government to say nothing can be done. If there is another spike in the oil price, much beyond where it is right now, we need to see efforts by the government to redistribute the extra benefits we get from a higher oil price to ensure that the oil price is not allowed to escalate in Guyana, the gasoline price. That will cause problems in the non-oil economy, potentially a recession in the non-oil economy, the loss of jobs. People will not be able to afford this, and it would be the height of absurdity to have something like that go on in a country that is benefiting from these higher oil prices. The price at the pump should not be allowed to escalate to ridiculous levels. And we in the PNCR have put forward our solution already, which is that you compensate the importers to keep the price within a certain range based off of what you determine is the level you want to keep it. So if the oil price that they're importing it at is above a certain level, you compensate them the difference. That keeps the gasoline price nice and low and allows us to weather the storm. Nobody really anticipated, or nobody had a crystal ball that they'd know exactly what was going to happen in the Ukraine war. Don't let anyone tell you that. And no one was talking about that back in December. But the point being, we've had to deal with that spike. Nothing has been done particularly. We've got now the potential of a further spike. We need to have in our mind already how we're going to combat this particular issue. They have said nothing more can be done, which I think is a very risky approach to take. And we need to be alert as an oil-producing country about developments in the oil and gas industry. That seems to me to be obvious. Let's get the next slide up as we roll on through this. And this will kind of give further indication of that. So Germany and other countries are trying to figure out how they're going to navigate this, whether they can rely less on Russian gas. That's the curves that you're seeing, where they can stockpile some Russian gas. And as we close off this point, I'll just give you an interesting indication. So as much as the allegation is, and of course you can have your own opinion on it, think of it face up, but the allegation is that the Russians have anticipated that the Germans will try and stockpile natural gas, and so they have reduced the amount that they supply them to stop them from stockpiling. This means that during the winter period, if they decide to shut off the gas to the Germans entirely and to Europe more broadly, Europe will not have been able to store enough gas, and so you'll see a major economic problems, and people will be frozen out of their homes and so on and so forth. That, of course, implies massive political tension, which could lead to a real big spike in the price of oil. Okay, folks, let's get the next slide up. Well, actually, we're going to hear a quick video from the press conference today, which gives you a sense of this issue regarding the speaker not allowing us to have a motion regarding the investigation of Sue. And that's tied back into oil. All these things are connected, viewers. So we'll play that short video, and that'll give you some perspective. This is a video from the press conference today.
Sitting of the National Assembly, the opposition APNU-AFC tabled a motion on a definite matter of urgent public importance. The motion simply asked the National Assembly to take immediate action to ensure an independent, credible, and impartial investigation by international investigators into the alleged allegations of bribery, corruption, and money laundering as revealed in the two documentaries released by Vice News involving Bharat Jagdeo and Bharat Jagdeo, the Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. The Speaker, Manzoor Nadir, denied the motion. For the benefit of the Guyanese public, we here respond to the flimsy reasons he tendered for his decision. The Speaker claimed that the Sugate affair was merely another allegation of corruption made in the press, and as such did not reach the threshold as an urgent matter of national importance. The ridiculousness of the Speaker's decision is clear-cut when one considers that in the Vice News reports, the allegations of bribe-taking, influence peddling, and money laundering involving Jagdeo are supported by self-incriminatory utterances made on hidden camera by Sue Geron, where he is considered as the Vice President, Jagdeo's go-between and fixer, other participants, and by Jagdeo himself in the comfort of his Pradoville mansion. President Ali, Jagdeo himself, and Robertson Ben, Minister of Home Affairs, have all called for an investigation, irrespective of the fact that they were engaging in political damage control under the pressure of growing public outrage. How could the Speaker, if he wished to prove his self-claimed independence, choose to ignore this reality?
Yes, viewers. So there you see a snippet from the press conference talking about the Speaker refusing to hear Sugate's allegations. Now, there's really two elements to this. The first being that given the specificity, given the depth, given how much was revealed in that particular Vice documentary, it is, I think, pretty obvious that it's a very serious matter and therefore needs to be dealt with. Now, the other side of this is that as much as the speaker is saying that this is just something that's in the news and so on, is not something that's substantial, we've heard both the president and the vice president actually indicate that yes, an investigation is warranted. Now, it seems to me the speaker's a little bit behind the times, because if both the president and the vice president think that this is a serious matter that is worth investigation, whether or not you believe what they're saying, if they say that, is it for the speaker now to say that it is not a matter that rises to that level? It seems to me that the president and vice president, who are fingered really in the allegations, it seems to me that they would have more of a say on this issue than the speaker. So the speaker coming from kind of left field to say this isn't a matter of importance is a bit. Or a matter of enough importance is a bit, I don't want to say comical, but surprising, quite surprising. But I'll add another texture that again was voiced during the press conference today. I'll add some more texture. So the speaker is also saying it's not an urgent matter. Folks, in that Vice documentary, Sue opens his mouth and says other amounts before this have been bigger, to paraphrase, like the oil company. Folks, we have an auction of Guyana's remaining oil blocks that is coming up later on this year, in just a few months. If we have someone making the types of corruption allegations, saying that he paid a bribe for an oil company, and you have an auction of blocks for oil companies coming up, Doesn't that say to you that that is a serious, serious concern about the auction of these oil blocks? That when we bring in companies to deal with these offshore oil blocks to explore and produce, it is a possibility that these companies are just shams and that bribes have already been paid and that these companies will be able to come in and get our resources because they paid the highest bribe. Because that is potentially what Sue is saying. So to say that this is not urgent, it to me is not a correct reading of the situation in the country. This is incredibly urgent. We've got shortly oil block auctions coming up. Shortly oil block auctions coming up. So I think that this is not the correct decision that the speaker has taken. It's very concerning, and the Guyanese people need to see a proper investigation of these allegations. Need to see. We in the opposition have called for. First of all, an investigation, but second of all, the vice president to be fired or resign to facilitate that investigation, and third of all, for there to be further measures for transparency and accountability, and we've been specific about those measures before we have the auction of these oil blocks. These are serious allegations. No one should be in Guyana saying, I paid a bribe to get an oil company going here. That is very concerning, and it could be tens of billions of US that's on the line. Not tens of billions of Guyana dollars, tens of billions of US that could be on the line. So for the speaker to say that this is not an urgent matter to me, I don't understand how he can come to that conclusion. This is very serious. No one should be opening their mouth when it comes to corruption in this country and saying oil company. Of all things, if we can't protect the offshore oil fields, can we protect anything? Man, folks, this is very serious and it needs to be dealt with in a serious way. Very serious and needs to be dealt with in a serious way. But on that note, we've got now what seems to me to be, an afterthought of an action, but an action that's been taken. We'll see where it goes. We'll see whether it is a serious action. We'll see. But that's where Jagdeo has finally filed his lawsuit to sue Sue. Finally filed his lawsuit to sue Sue. Let's get the slide up there. We got a slide with Mr. Sue there. Apparently, no one has seen the next slide over. Apparently, no one has seen Sue for months. Since February, no one has seen Sue, but Jagdeo finally has filed his lawsuit against Sue. So we'll see whether we hear finally from Sue. Everybody in Ghana looking for Sue. Can I find Sue to sue? Folks, this is you can't make this stuff up. Someone who is living next door to the vice president in a house that he owns, in a house that he's renting from the vice president, making these types of allegations. Talking about an oil company, how we bribe how much more. It was a bigger bribe. Talking about a hydroelectric dam, which is, again, going to be a Amalia Falls Hydro. Oh, it was a bigger bribe for that. I mean, goodness me. This needs to be investigated. We need to get the truth. We've seen the FBI saying that they're willing to assist with investigations in Guyana. We've seen calls by the AFC for the World Bank to be brought in to investigate. One way or another, an international impartial investigation needs to take place. This is very serious. If we cannot protect our offshore oil blocks from corruption, we cannot protect anything in the country from corruption. The dollar amounts there are far higher than in any other area. We're talking about tens of billions of US. Very serious. But no, this is what we're hearing. Folks, will as we wind down the program tonight, we mentioned a few quotes from the Vice News documentary in the press conference today. One thing that I've always indicated is my favorite quote of it is that after the person posing as someone going to carry out a bribe, after that person asks Sue, I have to know that the money is going to Jagdeo. I have to know that any money I pay you is actually going to him. Sue says, don't worry, you and I will go together and give him the money. That's what Sue said. Sue sounds hella confident, as the young people say that. Sue sounds quite confident. Don't worry, you and I will go together and give him the money. Folks, we need an investigation. We need a thorough investigation as to what exactly is going on here. Unbelievable things. Unbelievable things. And even after that, the full Vice documentary, when released, indicated that there's an entire money laundering ring that is being leveraged to avoid restrictions on the movement of funds out of their country, that is being used to facilitate corrupt Chinese officials back in China when they want to launder money and move it around. A whole parallel banking system is what that alleges. Again, that needs investigation. We have had our difficulties with money laundering in this country and being blacklisted and these types of things. These things need to be dealt with seriously, or we'll face the risk of being blacklisted all over again. Because it would seem that there is a parallel banking system that could be operating in this country. All sorts of extreme levels of detail we're hearing. Oh, you can bring in the money. This is the amount you must pay to bring in the money. It's higher for people with more dangerous types of money, like Chinese government officials, because you could be arrested. All sorts of details these folks are given. It's not abstract. Oh yeah, money could come in. It's a lot of detail, indicating that local government officials have been bribed, indicating that the president had received monies. This is very serious. This is very serious, and it needs to be treated seriously. Folks, it's not enough for the government to say, oh, there should be an investigation. We need an impartial international investigation. That is what is required here. So let's see how these events continue to unfold, folks. Let's see how these events continue to unfold. But I'll leave you with a couple of keynotes. Number one, we want to know if we're going to run into a Sue at any point in this country, because everybody's looking for Sue. We need to hear from Sue. And number two, Guyana is booming, growing, money being made. Why is there nothing in the budget? Why is there nothing in this supplemental budget they're bringing to Parliament to help Guyanese to feel that boom through some sort of direct cost of living mitigation? Something for the people. Why is there nothing? That's the question we want to leave you with tonight, folks. A question that I'm sure that you'll ask yourself and come up with your own conclusions on. But ultimately, we need to see more for the people of Guyana. We cannot proceed as if there's no oil in this country. Everybody knows the secret is out. So we need to see better and bigger from the government. Thank you, and thank you for tuning in to the Lowdown. Always good to have you. Always happy to have a chat, and we'll catch you again on Saturday.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.